Hello and welcome back to College Algebra, MAT 150. In this lecture we will be discussing factoring by grouping. So we've discussed factoring out of GCF. So what is factoring by grouping? Well, basically you have two groups, and the full steps are this. To factor by grouping, you basically want to make sure you have four terms. This can actually be extended, but for our purposes, we're just looking for four terms to keep it simple. We then want to group the first two terms and the second two terms. When you do this, you always, when you're forming the groups, always put a plus between the groups. So this means that if one of the terms has a negative and it's right in between, you have to include that negative into one of the groups, okay, usually into the one on the right. Then what we do is basically just GCF factor twice. We GCF factor each group, and then out of each group, and then if we did everything right, we can GCF factor a common binomial, which is the last type of GCF that we did, between what should then be two terms. All right, and sometimes if you can't factor the common binomial, just go back to the original and sort of switch it up a little bit. Switch the middle two terms. So let's take a look at this first one. So we have x cubed plus x squared plus 7x plus 7. And we're going to try to factor by grouping. So the first thing, almost the 0th step, do we have four terms? Are there four terms here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, there are. So we can go through and form the groups. So I'm just going to, again, be simple, group the first two terms here. Between groups, so we've made this one group, we're always going to put a plus. Then, in this one, we have plus 7x plus 7. Again, if this was a negative, this would be included over here. We just say plus, and then parentheses, 7x plus 7. But now what we ask ourselves is, what can I do? How can I GCF factor each of these groups? Well, what does this one have in common? We have x cubed and x squared. Well, there's no numeric part here. But what we do have is there's an x, they have an x's in common, and the one with the smallest exponent is x squared. And we can ask ourselves, what is x cubed divided by x squared? Well, that's just x. What's x squared divided by x squared? Well, that's just 1. So we've GCF factored an x squared out of this first group. Now we're going to move to the second group. What do they have in common? Well, we see a 7x and we see a 7. Well, they both have a 7 in common. They don't have a variable in common, but they do have the 7. So again, keep this plus. So we factor out the 7. That's the GCF. And then we divide each of these terms by 7. So 7x divided by 7 is x. 7 divided by 7 is 1. And now, did we do things right? Well, we now have, this is one term, this is one term. What do these both of these terms have in common? They both have x plus 1 in common. So that's what we can put out in front. And what do they have left over when we do pull it out in front? An x squared and a plus 7. And this is fully factored for our purposes. All right. So we come to one like number 2. And this one is kind of interesting. So first off, we ask ourselves, just like before, are there four terms? Well, as is, yes there are. X squared plus 3x minus 2x minus 6. So there are in fact four terms. The interesting thing, unlike this one, we couldn't combine the x squared and the 7x. We could combine the 3x and the minus 2x, but we don't want to. And we will demonstrate why in the next video, why this separation has occurred. But for right now, we're just going to assume that this is the way we need to look at it so that we can do factor by grouping. So first off, because we now have four terms, let's just go ahead and group them. X squared plus 3x. That's what our first two terms are. We'll just put groups around them. But then we come to our first interesting thing. We have minus right here, but what should we always have between groups? We should always have a plus. So that's what we do. In this minus 2x, actually the negative part gets grouped in the second group. So we have minus 2x, minus 6. And then what do we have in common? We have an x in common. So we factor out an x. X squared divided by x is x. 3x divided by x is 3. And then, so we've GCF factored that. Negative 2x minus 6. What do they have in common? Well, first off, to note, we have this negative now. So if you ever have a negative, go ahead and try to factor that out. That's the first thing to note. And then just go ahead. So what do we, this one has a variable, this one doesn't, so we can't factor out a variable. But is there something I can divide both of these by? Well, 2. So let's try to factor out a negative 2. Negative 2x divided by negative 2. So that's what we remember, we pulled out the negative as well, so divide by the negative. So negative 2x divided by negative 2 is positive x. Negative 6 divided by negative 2 is positive 3. And we know we did it right. So let's look at these two terms, x times x plus 3. So this is one big term, and so is this. Each of these terms have two factors, by the way. And what do they have in common? Well, they have an x plus 3 binomial in common. So that's what we pulled out. And what do we have left over? We have this x and this minus 2. And then it's completely factored. X plus 3 times x minus 2. Those are our two factors. This concludes this lecture.